everybody. I'm Kim O'Rourke, the recycling coordinator for the City of Middletown, and thanks for joining us today. We have a great program on backyard composting coming up. I just want to mention that the city works with the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments 2 times a year, and we do a community compost bin and rain barrel sale, and we're running it now. And also, as part of that sale, we offer a backyard composting workshop. Now, normally that workshop is in person. We've had it at our wonderful Russell Library and at the Middletown Senior Center. This year, it is March of 2020, and we're still in the midst of COVID. So we are having our workshop virtually. And we have 2 great presenters from the UConn Master Composter program with us today. But first, I briefly want to mention, as the recycling coordinator, as someone who's very involved in trash and someone who works for a municipality, I just want to mention that there are lots of reasons to compost, and our wonderful presenters are going to be talking about them today. But right now, it's important to realize that we are heading towards a trash disposal crisis. And if we don't do anything, if we don't make any changes, we will be in a crisis and trash disposal costs will escalate. And there's no magic bullet to correct this. There's no one thing that'll work, but there's a bunch of small actions that we all can take on different levels to have an impact on the amount of trash that we produce and what happens to it. And this involves not only us, but also manufacturers, retailers, trash haulers, businesses, organizations. Everybody generates trash. It's something that we all generate. So we all need to partake in reducing our waste so that we can solve these problems. Now, food waste and organics are very valuable, and there's something that they are something that should not be going in the trash. So we try to. This is a great program to help teach people how to handle their waste themselves. Because if we can handle it ourselves in our backyard, we're not paying the disposal costs. We're not paying the transportation costs. We're not having the environmental costs of sending this material away. And it is an incredibly valuable material, especially if you are a gardener. But really, it's helpful to anybody. So today, we have some folks from, as I mentioned, the UConn Master Composter program. And that program is a great program that not only teaches people how to compost, but it teaches them how to teach others to compost. And we're very fortunate to have these folks here with us today. We have Ruth Eckoff and Danielle Butsch, and thank you very much for coming. I'm going to take a second to introduce both of them, and then they're going to go into their presentation. So Ruth is currently living in the town of Lebanon with her husband, her dog Bailey, her cat Max, and 12 chickens. And she works full-time at Chelsea Groton Bank as a BSA analyst. Her hobbies include gardening, photography, and helping her husband with his beekeeping hobby, which sounds really cool. And she has been composting for a few years and decided to, in 2019, to take the Master Composter course to get a better understanding of composting. Now, Danielle, by day, works for Physical Therapy and Sports Medicine Center as the director of the PT clinic at Yale Health Plan. And I love these backgrounds because, you know, they're normal people, right? They're normal people, like all of us. So outside of work, she lives with her wife and 2 daughters in Madison. She's a member of the Town of Madison's Conservation Commission and is working on her community service portion of becoming a certified master composter. So thanks and welcome to both of you today. And why don't we get started with Ruth?
Okay. So if you could, Danielle, would you go ahead and go to the next slide, please? Okay, so welcome. In this presentation, Danielle and I will be going over the general principles of compost composting, compost structures, and the proper ingredients for the compost pile. Let me also mention that reference materials are listed at the end of this presentation. Next. So why compost? Well, it adds organic nutrients to the soil. Soil properly amended with compost has enough macro and trace nutrients so that little addition fertilizer, Can we stop for a second?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Okay. So why compost? Well, it adds organic nutrients to the soil. Soil properly amended with compost has enough macro and trace nutrients so that little additional fertilizer is required for plant growth. It's an excellent amendment to improve soil structure. Composting increases the ability for plants to resist disease. They thrive. But most importantly, composting reduces the amount of waste going to the landfill. Next. What is composting? All organic matter decomposes with time. And controlled composting, which is what we're talking about in this presentation, is a practice when we compost at home. We work to intentionally speed up the process. A hot pile reaches internal temps of 130 to 150 degrees, which is the ideal temperature for the pile to reach maximum effectiveness. Types of composting. There's aerobic with oxygen, anaerobic without oxygen, vermicomposting, which is worms, oxygen, and water, and bokashi, which instead of decomposing, the matter is fermented like pickling. Next. Composting is a controlled natural process of recycling organic matter into natural fertilizer that enriches the soil and plants. The result of such managed decomposition is compost that can be used to add nutrients to and improve the structure of soil naturally. Next. There are 6 requirements for proper composting. It's a basic recipe. Carbon-containing materials, which would be browns, nitrogen-containing materials, which are greens, microorganisms to break down the carbon and the nitrogen, oxygen, moisture, and warm temperatures. Let me also add that outdoor temperatures need to be above 50 degrees for major microbial activity, but you can still continue placing kitchen scraps in the pile during the winter since minor decomposing starts in 28 days. Next. Here are some examples of the carbon-nitrogen ratio in specific organic matter. Decomposers, the microorganisms, need carbon for energy and nitrogen for growth. The perfect compost pile would have a proper blended initial ratio between 25:1 to 30:1. And it doesn't have to be this technical for the home gardener or the home composter. Think browns, which are carbon, and greens, which are nitrogen. And this would be a common sense approach. Next. So in the common sense approach, which is the brown and green ratio, dry brown matter is normally high in carbon. And this would be dry leaves, straw, and wood chips. Fresh and green matter is normally high in nitrogen. And this would consist of grass clippings and vegetative kitchen waste and edge trimmings. So the blend of that would be, or the ideal would be 2/3 brown matter and 1/3 green matter, based on dry weight, not volume. So how would this look? So you would layer the pile with 3 to 5 inches of brown, alternating with 1 to 2 inches of green. You would add an activator, which would be like a shovelful of soil or compost. Every few layers, add some twigs to help aerate. Water each layer, and after 2 weeks, the pile will be reduced roughly by half. Turn the pile and build up or back up by alternating the old matter with new. So next. This slide mentions again the ideal carbon to nitrogen ratio. Bacteria naturally breaks down the organic matter, and to ensure that you have microorganisms, add a shovelful of soil to the finished compost. Next. Previously, I mentioned water, or oxygen and water are part of the requirements. One way to get oxygen to the pile is by turning with a spade or a spading fork. You can leave the pile in place or start a new pile next to the original. For the water component, locate the pile on a flat surface to avoid excess leaching, and make a depression in the top of the pile to collect water. Next. So the interior pile temperature, microbial decomposition releases heat. So the internal pile temperature for ideal decomposition is between 90 and 125 degrees. Below 90 degrees and decomposition is taking place at reduced rates. Decomposition will still take place in a cold pile, but it takes much longer. Also, for a pile that goes over 160 degrees, the pile is too hot for bacteria to survive, so you would need to aerate the pile to cool off. Most pathogens die at temperatures of 130 degrees, while seeds are destroyed at temperatures in excess of 140 degrees. I don't recommend adding weeds and diseased plants to your compost pile. Dispose of them separately. Next. So to recap, decomposition depends on the proper carbon and nitrogen ratio, compost activators, the presence of microorganisms, the dampness of the pile, outdoor and indoor pile temperatures, the amount of oxygen, and the frequency of aeration. The pile should be damp but not soggy, water thoroughly 2 times per month in dry summer, outdoor temperatures regularly above 50 degrees, and the interior temperatures of the pile should be between 90 and 125 degrees. And don't let the pile heat up to over 150. The frequency of turning affects the time of the finished products. Next. Also, location. Decomposition depends on location. Sunlight will speed the decomposition process, but you will need to water more. My compost pile is located on the edge of my property, mostly in the shade. As long as I'm using the common sense approach, I'm achieving decomposition, just not at the accelerated rate. But I don't have to add water as much as if I had it located in a sunny spot. The volume of the pile should be roughly a minimum of 3 feet to a maximum of 5 feet. Too small, and there won't be the mass necessary to get the internal heat up to 150 degrees, because the heat will escape through the edges of the pile. Too large and insufficient oxygen will get to the microorganisms at the center of the pile. The bigger the individual bits of that you're adding to the compost pile, the longer it takes to decompose. So if you add leaves or newspaper, it's better to shred these and to chop up your kitchen scraps into smaller pieces. So Danielle will now go on to speak about compost structures and what you can and cannot add to your compost pile.
Okay, hello. I'm Danielle, and I'm gonna just talk about what this actually looks like in your backyard. Sorry, there we go. Okay, so there are a number of different alternatives for actually implementing this into your backyard. You can, simply have a pile with no structure whatsoever. That is best for people with, some property where you don't have to have it right outside your back door. Or you can build a simple wire cage using, chicken wire and posts, or, metal stakes made into a circle. I'll show pictures in a minute. You can build yourself a wooden bin. You can buy a plastic bin with a cover, or you can buy a variety of some more advanced tumbler bins, and I'll get to all of that. So you can start with just a compost pile. If you have a yard that lends itself to this, You can literally just kind of throw leaves in a pile. You can also add kitchen scraps, whatever you want to that. That is, you know, acceptable for some people, and other people who live in more urban or, you know, have neighbors that are close by do not choose to do this. Your kind of next step up would be something like these guys, the you know, chicken wire, you know, open top structure that's very loose, but you can just throw your leaves in there. Kitchen waste, if you'd like, you can throw weeds in there, things like that. It's not as accessible if you want to use it for gardening later on, but it absolutely creates a pile that will compost and break down, and you are able to therefore divert food waste, divert leaf waste, divert waste from, you know, the trash system. Then over here, all the way to the left, you can see the similar structure made out of wood. You can also see the sort of sketched drawings, other alternatives. You can see the similar wire structure, some wooden structures, and some people even have like a cement structure built. Next, you can also do like a plastic compost bin or tumbler. The picture on the left is similar to something that I have in my yard. I keep it so that it's relatively close to our house, but not right on top of our house, because we want to be able to continue to put food scraps and, you know, make sure that we are diverting as much waste away from the waste stream and into our compost bin throughout the entire year. You really want to make sure that it's accessible enough so that you can use it all year round. Even if those food scraps are not breaking down in the winter, we absolutely add to that pile all winter long. The tumbler that you see here on the right is another alternative to composting. This allows you to, instead of having to aerate by hand, it allows you to mix your compost and quite literally tumble it around, which can speed up the composting process. For people who are in a rush to get their compost as fast as possible, this can be a nice option. So then now I'm going to talk about proper ingredients for your compost pile. Great compost matter. Leaves, preferably shredded. We don't quite literally shred our leaves, but, you know, as leaves start to break down and fall apart, that's wonderful. Mulch, dryer lint from natural fabrics, those are all wonderful things to put in there. Soil and eggshells, so those are great things. And those are your carbon sources. And then your nitrogen, Ruth had talked about your carbon to nitrogen ratios. Great nitrogen sources are untreated grass clippings, as long as you don't have your lawn treated. Like just raw vegetative kitchen waste. And what they mean by that is all the peels to your apples, the peels for your potatoes, all of, you know, all your veggie scraps, all of the pits to things, all of that can go in there. Blood and bone meals, plant trimmings, cut up. If you have house plants and you kind of give them a little, you know, neatening up every now and then, that would go in there too. So good compost matter options, not necessarily the greatest, but very, very good and absolutely should go in there. Carbons are straw. Shredded up newspapers, you don't want to put the newspaper in like just as is. That'll sort of prevent aeration, in fact. So you want to, you know, rip up those newspapers and throw those in there. Shredded wood or bark, pine needles, and sawdust. Good nitrogen sources are if you deadhead your flowers and your non-invasive weeds. Your coffee grounds and tea leaves are good. Rotted farm stock manure, if you happen to have, you know, cows, horses, chickens like Ruth, all that can go in your compost pile. And mill organite, so that as well. Bad compost matter, don't want to use. Dairy products, meat and fish scraps, all of that. It's not that it will never break down, but it can be attractive to pests and other critters that you may not want to attract to your pile. Fats, oils, salad dressings, those will kind of gum up the works and make it so that things don't break down. They'll just kind of sit there. Pet feces, so by this they usually mean dogs and cats. Their feces, despite the fact that you can throw chicken poop and cow flops in there, you can't throw in dog and cat feces. That is not good. Diseased plant material, you want to avoid that as well. You don't want to put in coal, wood, charred ashes, or limestone. That does not break down well, and it's even if it does, it's not particularly good for your plants if you use it for gardening. Glossy or color magazines and newspapers, same, doesn't break down well, not good for the plants. Pesticide treated plant material, herbicide treated plant, grass clippings, and invasive weeds. A lot of times, if your pile does not get quite hot enough to kill the invasive weeds, you'll just be taking those weeds and then just planting them in your garden. And that's about it as far as the presentation goes.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah.
That was great.
Sharing. There you go.
Okay, I'm going to just offer a couple of slides for some additional information on if they have questions. So let me share my screen. I need to just here. Okay, there we go. Here we go. Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning, the city works with the RiverCOG folks in having a community compost bin sale. And we sell this compost bin, which is on the screen, although there's lots of choices. And you don't need this type of bin. As Danielle said, there's lots of different choices. But if you're interested, this is an option. We also sell rain barrels as well. So if you want to find out more information on that, it is on this website, the RiverCOG Composter Sale. Can't see the letters because your faces are covering it, but it's on the screen there. Now we do this twice a year. So if you're watching this this workshop at another time, you can always go on that site and you can still see if it's available or not. Currently, our pickup day is April 11th. So this spring sale is going to end about April 9th. It's open to anybody. You don't have to live in Middletown or the river towns to participate. You just have to be willing to come to Middletown or Old Saybrook to pick it up. So it gives you an opportunity to get started. And I'm happy to say that Ruth and Danielle will be at our pickup day on April 11th. So if you do have questions, please come and ask them, and they'll be happy to answer the questions. I also put up there our website for the City of Middletown. We have a recycling page and we have a composting page. So you can get more information there, and that tells you a little bit about what we're doing in the city for composting and diverting food waste. And this is my contact information. So if people do want to reach out and ask a question, you're welcome to call me or email me, and I'd be happy to talk to you. So I want to thank everybody for watching our presentation, and looking forward to hearing some questions and seeing some people on April 11th. So thanks for joining us, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm still sharing.